We'd like to welcome you today to the second of our classes on the updates of MyHeritage. We'd like to thank Elder Tanner for being here and for helping us out as he does every Sunday when we have classes. So we will go ahead, I'll stop my screen sharing and go ahead and turn the time over to him.
We're going to talk about 2023 update of MyHeritage, and this includes going back to last year, 2022, and picking up everything that's happened in the last year or so. So I think the biggest news that most of us had in the genealogical world was the fact that MyHeritage came back from the pandemic and had a live conference. The conference was split in two, so you had a live attendance at the Salt Palace in Salt Lake City, Utah, and you also had an online, extensively online presentation that you could take part in from around the world. And kind of fortunately for a lot of the people who attended in person, MyHeritage managed to bring their people across from Israel to the United States, to Salt Lake, and came and were at the families at the Roots Tech conference that for the first time in a couple of years, obviously. So the rest of us were very happy to see each other, to renew acquaintances, and to meet some of the new people from MyHeritage and from some of the other companies that were out there. First of all, kind of to explain from that standpoint, as I mentioned, MyHeritage is headquartered in Israel, and it's outside of in a suburb of Tel Aviv, and they are one of the largest, a major company in Israel. So this is and a major company in Europe. It's primarily their whole focus is primarily on Europe as opposed to the other places around the world, and so you will see a lot more growth in records from different countries in Europe and Eastern Europe and around the world than any of the other records that they've got. But they kind of cover everybody also. The question, of course, is what's new? There's a link down here at the bottom of the page, but you really don't need the link. What you need to do is go to the myheritage.com YouTube channel and look for the talk presentation given by Gilad Chapeth, who's the founder and CEO of MyHeritage, that he gave at Roots Tech. It's recorded. I'm not sure how long it'll actually stay online, but it was an amazing overview. And what's really more amazing about it is Gilad's explanation of how he got involved in genealogy altogether from the time he was quite young until today. And it's another interesting thing about him as the head of this very large worldwide company is that he announces at the beginning of his presentations quite regularly that he is a genealogist, and that is his main motivation for everything that he's done in building this company. And I really have to say that's quite different than almost every other large genealogy company out there. They're just most of them are in business to make money, but they're just kind of incidentally in the genealogy business, at least as far as the for-profit ones go. So please watch the video if you have some time to get into that. So basically, to understand a little bit about how this works, you really need to understand Roots Tech and what's going on with the Roots Tech website. If you go to rootstech.org and just link in, there's a link at the top of the page that says on demand. And if you go to the on demand, if you keep clicking, you'll click around and keep looking for all of the collections and all of the records. You'll find out that there's something over about 4,000 plus videos now housed on that RootsTech website. And many of those are part of RootsTech. Are going to be available for oncoming years, and so they have archives for the past years of videos. So you can get a lot of information about all of the different companies and all the different types of things that are going on in genealogy by looking through that huge collection of videos. But I might mention here that this is a screenshot from the MyHeritage blog, and MyHeritage puts exhaustively complete explanations of every one of their new features and everything that's going on the website in the company on their blog quite regularly. So if you go look for the MyHeritage blog, if you go to myheritage.com and go down to the bottom of the first page, the login page, then there's a link to the MyHeritage blog. And that should get you into all this information in a lot more detail. So that's kind of the recommendation, is to check out the videos on their websites, their YouTube website, their YouTube channel, also the ones that are on RootsTech, and then to kind of back that up with what's coming out on the blog regularly. Oh, wrong direction. Sorry, folks. So at RootsTech on Thursday, Maya Lerner presented the Innovation and Tech Forum at the Innovation and Tech Forum of RootsTech about MyHeritage's artificial intelligence time machine. One of the things that has essentially made MyHeritage go viral online the last couple of years has been their tremendously more sophisticated photo enhancement and photo alteration, photo editing type programs that they have put on the website itself. So these are part of the myheritage.com website. So you can get involved in uploading photographs and then using their tools to enhance the photographs. The enhancement includes repairing scratches and all sorts, doing repairs to the photograph, enhancing primarily the focus and the detail in the photograph, and then colorizing black and white photographs, and then also animating photographs, which is, by the way, one of the more spooky things you can experience. And then now we have a new part of that, and that's called the AI time machine, which uses text to image technology to create images of any photograph that you put up yourself. Usually everybody does themselves, and gives it into all different times, from prehistoric times to all sorts of things, Civil War soldiers. I mean, everything you can think of that comes up. So here's some examples of the AI time machine photos that have been enhanced. You can see the original people, and then you can see kind of how different types of photos come up. And then all these photos are then available for you. Like if you want to post them as your photo on Facebook or whatever, then you've got this lovely poster of you as an old hunter or something. I thought about doing that, but I just, it's one of those things that's kind of on my list I'd like to do, but it's probably not going to happen real soon, or if ever, because it's one of those things I just never seem to get around to. I always think of it when I'm presenting, and then when I get through, I've forgotten that I was going to do that. But it's a tremendously entertaining and interesting type of way of doing this animations. Now, so here's a question that comes up, and for some of us who are involved very much involved in images and photography and media and videos, like I am, for example. The question came up immediately because all of the major photo programs are coming out with artificial intelligence claims. So you're getting artificial intelligence on from Microsoft, you're getting it from Adobe, you're getting it from Google, you're getting it from, just every place around on the internet someplace. And you have lots of professional programs for professional photographers that do image enhancement. So the question is, for example, I have Photoshop, and Photoshop has recently implemented an enhancement or kind of restoration type thing for their Photoshop program, the main Photoshop, the classic Photoshop program. And so I compared it. I ran a photo through Photoshop and I ran a photo through MyHeritage, and I just have to be, it's just not opinion. It happens to be the fact that the one from MyHeritage does a superior job on most of the photos than Photoshop does. So even though you might think that this is not something that they do primarily as a big company, it does help to help you to repair and enhance some of those old photos that you wish were not so blurry, or you wish were not so in such bad shape. So it's quite a great thing for people like us who deal in old photos. A lot of people are dealing in new photos, and they have to deal with what comes off their camera. But this is simply a way of taking all those old photos and helping them look a lot better. Here's another selection. The images on the upper left over there are Gilad Jepeth. He's the CEO of MyHeritage, and the ones on the right corner you might recognize. I like the one in the middle. I wished I'd had that when I was trying cases in court. I think that would have been an effective picture way to look at being in court. So if that was possible. And then the middle picture is Randy Seaver, who's a friend of mine, a blogger for many years. Okay, so let's kind of get into the programs updates. MyHeritage has over time evolved on the way that they present the information on their family tree. And one of the things that they've come up with is color coding. Now, this is a new feature. The color coding does kind of an interesting job of showing the images, because what it does is it allows you to see, to group as any way you want, and you can assign different colors to different lines and kind of customize your color scheme. But when you mark a line, for example, if that line is marked and they're related to the primary person, then you can see if there's what you might call intermarriage in your family tree, because people who are marked as a color on one line might start showing up the same color on another line, and that indicates that the people that now that color are also related to the other people that are the same color. So it's an interesting way to see the intermarriage and the fact that you may be related to the same people on two different lines, and it's kind of an interesting situation when you get into that. The main thing, though, that you'd want to look at are some of the DNA functions on MyHeritage. This one takes a little bit of explanation. This is called a CM explainer. It's actually centimorgan explainer. A centimorgan is a way of measuring a percentage relationship, DNA relationship. So the higher your centimorgan count, the more likely you are to be closely related. And what's happened in this is that DNA, because DNA has purely scientific background, it came from genetics. It's something that's been developing for well over 100 years back in time, and only recently, relatively recently, was applied to genealogy in the sense of trying to sort out how and why you're related to people. Immediately, what happens, of course, is that people start finding out that they are related to people that they are either related or unrelated. In other words, they're finding both ways that they're not related to the parents they thought they had, and they're related to some other parents that they didn't know. And this has kind of been big news in the kind of genealogical community, but some of it's made into full, on major news stories around because of maybe the people who find that are prominently people who are prominent, or there's a particularly interesting way that they found out that they were related. So there's just a constant stream of these stories coming out, primarily from the DNA, probably from the genealogy companies who have family trees and who have DNA. So basically what this does is what's coming along with all the DNA is you get a whole kind of a burden, an overburden of what is known as jargon. That means language that is technical language, or language that is very specific to a particular area of culture, life, science, or whatever. So when you start talking to attorneys, you get a lot of legal jargon. When you talk to doctors, you get medical jargon. And when you talk to genealogists, as particularly genealogists involved in DNA, you get a lot of DNA jargon. You get centimorgans and matches and relationships and chromosomes and all sorts of things like that. But what Family Search is, what MyHeritage has done here is to basically demystify it all. The CMN explainer explains in straightforward language who these people are and how we are related and what that means and what the most common recent ancestry is. So by going in there and putting in the centimorgan value, which is just a number, then just entering that number and your age and the match's age, then it will explain to you in common language exactly how you are possibly related to that person. So it's taking out all the jargon, it's making it very, very much more transparent, and makes it much easier to understand exactly who we're talking about here. And it's translated all of the first cousins once removed and twice removed and all that. It's taken out all that removed stuff and explaining it as by using the reference of the common ancestor and telling you that this is the son or daughter of your grandfather, or the son and daughter of your great grandfather, or whatever, instead of calling them some really hard name to understand. So this is a quite an interesting innovation, and it's been and I have to admit that's been helpful to me because I can get in there and start seeing exact probabilities, not just this thing. And the other thing that comes with this that's not readily apparent is that the probabilities are now down to a much more exact probability. So you'll see there at 71.8%. So it's getting more specific that of the relatives. So if you have two people and you don't know which two you're more closely related to, then you have the DNA number, you have the centimorgan number, and that is translated here into a probability percentage that puts you into knowing exactly, making a good judgment as to who you've got, who's the closest of these two relatives. So here's what happens when they kind of change the diagram. And this is the unremoved, it's removing the removals. So a first cousin removed is not there. And it tells you exactly how you are related to these people and what first and second cousins are. So it's, and the other part of that is that there's the percentage of those. So those percentages are average percentages for that, how far that person is from you and how much percentage of the DNA relationship would come up if that was the person you were worried about. So this is kind of a not just an interesting, but a very useful tool. And it makes it much easier to explain to people if you're being involved in doing like we are as missionaries at the BYU Family History Library, of trying to explain all this to people. You can kind of pull this up and it'll give them an idea of what they're looking at without getting into all of those arcane terms that they use for DNA. Another thing that's important about what MyHeritage is doing is the actual increase. And somebody asked a question before just before the class started, and that was about who, if MyHeritage had the most records, and I explained that the numbers of records is differently calculated and represented by every one of the different companies. So every one of the major genealogy companies say they have this X billion records, and we don't ever know what they're counting, because some are counting names, some are counting pages, some are counting images, it depends. So, but really the important thing to know, and here's the rule, the basic rule is this: if the website has the record you're looking for, that's great. If they don't have the record that you're looking for, it doesn't matter how many records they have. So I sort of ignore the issue of whether they have, what number kind of records they have. It's kind of like questioning somebody who's doing genealogy and asking them, how many names do you have in your family tree? I mean, like, I really know that. I have multiple family trees on multiple programs. And as far as my primary reference, because it's a unified family tree, is on Family Search. So I have no even the vaguest idea how many people are out there. But I can tell you that it's a very large number, really large number. Okay, but so what has happened here? What happens here is that MyHeritage has chosen to create databases, lists of records that have been totally unavailable to today. And this is like one really great example. This is the Israel immigration list going back into the early 1900s. And what it does is examine every single person who came to Israel. So these historical records are all the immigration that came. It's just like the records for Ellis Island or Castle Garden in the United States. They're records that tell you all of the people who have come to Israel. And you might be surprised. One of the newer developments, so these, by the way, these particular, all of these things are new developments in on MyHeritage, but they're not necessarily all related to each other. They're just things that happen on different parts of the website. So it's not like there's some progression of things that are happening as I go through this, because I'm just describing the newest things that you may not have ever seen or thought about were available on MyHeritage. One of the things that is out there along with the photographs is recognition. Now, a lot of the programs out there can let you tag the photo, and this is what's happened here, is that you can now tag an enhancement to the tagging program. So you can tell that this is a picture of this relative. So this is John Smith and Rebecca, his wife, and their children. And you can go in and tell on the picture which ones that have been done. But what happens is that using artificial intelligence, then MyHeritage is saying, okay, so you tag this person. So now here's a bunch of other photos that you have. Are they all the same person? So you still have to make the decision if they are or aren't, but this is a way of not having to go through and tag every single photo every time, because then they will add these suggestions of tagging to you. So then you can say, yes, all these people are the same, bink, they're all tagged. So that helps to organize and make your memories, your photos on MyHeritage much more available. Okay, so one other discovery, this also has to do with DNA, but it goes over into another important part of MyHeritage, and that's that MyHeritage is in multiple languages. Now, how does that work? Well, primarily it's called global name translation. And what global name translation does is that if your name is somehow written in, I mean, if it's in English, for example, it will translate that English name into 42 different languages. So you can go in and look at find that name, and then if you do a search for your name, it will translate that name into 40 different languages and do the search through all the records in all those different languages. If your ancestors are all speaking English and you go back to the English languages in England, it's probably not going to help you a whole lot. But if you have an immigrant and you aren't sure what their name might have been, how it might have been spelled, or how it might have been represented, if it's, say your name was John, when an immigrant came to the United States and they came from Mexico, so their name may have been Juan in Mexico, or Johann, or Johannes, or any number of others. All of those, with all the different things, are the ones that are looked for. So does it work with surnames? Yes, it works for surnames, because to some extent, when they're transliterated, there's a possibility that they could be untransliterated back to their original form in the foreign country. So they're searching all of that. That's what they're searching. And so the searchings are much more efficient. There's kind of an add-on to that comment, however, and that is that there's really no way that on MyHeritage that you can do a search, a manual search, where you go in and put the name in and put like a few things in the search that will compare in any way with its standard background searching for you on every record. So basically, if you go in, the process here with MyHeritage is to go in and put your family tree information into MyHeritage and let them do the searching, and they will find and search every record, every name, everything in your field, and translate all the names into the different languages. And now what this has added is it will do name translation for your DNA matches. So then you're able to get more information from your DNA matches. So how does DNA work with a website like MyHeritage, or why is this the case? Well, first of all, DNA will only work in the sense of genealogically working to find direct relationships if you have a DNA test. Okay, right. So you need to take a DNA test. The question always comes up, well, can you take more than one test? Yes, you can take tests for every one of the major companies that do tests. But the latest discussion online indicates that there's really only five companies that have sufficient family tree databases to match you with anyone. And out of all those, out of those 5, there's only 2 that have databases large enough that it would make a difference. And the difference between the 2, which the 2 are essentially MyHeritage and Ancestry. But the difference is that whatever they claim for numbers is immaterial, because it's not the total number of DNA tests, or the total number of users, or the total number of records have nothing to do with what I said a moment ago. Unless they have a person that is a potential match to you, then it's basically not going to help you. And so if you're looking for matches you need to be carefully understand which kinds of records they have to use to match you, to help you match 2 people, and where their basic user base is. And so that's why I said at the beginning that MyHeritage's user base is primarily in Europe, because that's not necessarily British Isles, not excluding the British Isles, but that's not the focus. The focus is into the countries in Europe. And so that's where their millions and millions of users are. And that's where you're going to be able to find DNA matches. And now they translate the names across, so you'll have even a better opportunity of actually running into and seeing that the person that is signed in with the language at the top there, that you'll know that that's what that would be in English. And that may help you to match up to your surnames, which are helpful in getting past this information. So this is going to be the 42 different languages that I mentioned, and it's going to translate into all those languages. Now, another thing that's come out, of course, is that they have on MyHeritage is the 1950 US Census. Okay, and so they can tell you to go, if the websites have indexed the 1950 census, then they can say, come and search for your ancestors on the 1950 census. Well, on MyHeritage, you simply wouldn't do that, because once the 1950 census was indexed, they began to make what are called record matches, and they began to look up every person on your family tree that's on the 1950 census. So you'll have a record match for all the records in the 1950 census. It'll already looked everybody up for you. That's why I say that the purpose of the next step, once you take a DNA test and get information, you absolutely have to have a family tree. That means you need to put on more than 5 names or more than 10 names. You need to start working on getting your names extended on there, or the information that you're getting from the DNA test or from looking up the 1950 census is going to be pretty meaningless to you. You're not going to be helping you understand anything much at all. To find out that somebody may be related to you and they're in the 1950 census, unless you have a family tree, that isn't going to help you understand exactly what's going on. So part of this whole thing, and even though they sell these DNA tests, it's a very high percentage of the people who take the DNA test do not go to the second step of developing a family tree and actually understanding and learning about who their relatives are. So maybe that's all they're looking for is some kind of ethnicity estimate that'll tell them that they came from Israel, from Germany, or they came from Ireland or someplace, but not helping in a genealogical standpoint. So without the tree, there's really no genealogy being done at all. Okay, so here's kind of a summary of some of the, at the time that this particular infographic was created, and the numbers here have already changed probably considerably. So basically, there's a whole bunch of different parts of MyHeritage that you can see on this one infographic. In the upper right-hand corner, you have the AI time machine. You can see that they've already had 36 million photos at the time of this, which is a month or two ago. Of this particular infographic, 36 million photos had already been uploaded. They've got 3.5 million tagged with the photo tagger. They have 1,894 webinars on family tree webinars. They've had 10 million photos animated. And if you're looking down there in the lower sort of right middle there, it's got a picture, it says 10 million photos animated, and it's got a picture. That's an interesting picture because that happens to be a photo that was taken of me and my wife shortly after we got married. And that animated photo is my wife. And the interesting thing about that was at Roots Tech, we had opportunity, Ann and I, my wife and I did, to go to some of the Roots Tech, some of the MyHeritage events that they had. One was a very nice dinner for some of the people there who people that have known them for a long time, mostly my personal contacts and relationship with MyHeritage goes clear back to very shortly after they came to the United States. So almost their entire history has been, we've been contacting as frequently as once or twice or more a week for many, many years now, back and forth with MyHeritage. But we had gone to this dinner and we were leaving the dinner, and the person that Maya Lerner, that was the one I showed earlier in the photo, who's in charge of the technology part of the software development part of MyHeritage. Maya was kind of seated at the table as Anne walked by, and she turned around and saw Anne and said, "Oh, there's the most famous person in the world." Because basically this photo has gone all over the globe to millions and millions and millions of users of MyHeritage and been used in ads all over the world. So it's kind of an interesting situation there, but fortunately, no one seeing these photos would recognize us on the street. So we would never have people rushing up to getting our autographs or anything like that. There's a lot of other technology here that's technology from the past. There's the deep stories technology that allows you to create a visual, like a video representation of stories about your ancestors. There's the theories of family relativity that help find a common ancestor using both the family trees and the DNA, and all of the other kinds of things that are out there. So these are in 1 year, MyHeritage added 500 million new family tree profiles. That means 500 million additional people into their website, all of which, by the way, are searched to see whether or not they are related to you. And then MyHeritage tells you with what are called smart matches that you have a possible relative with this person that has these names in this part of their family tree. So there are so many different things that they can do that it's takes quite a while. Now, one of the things that's coming fairly soon that they said was, something we could talk about is that they're going to use artificial intelligence to date family photos. So they're going to be able to tell you that this photo was taken between such and such a date or around this date by looking at the people in the photos and the way they're dressed and their background and everything. Then the artificial intelligence program will analyze that, compare it to dated photos, and then say these people lived in the 1950s or these people lived in 1870 or this, so forth. And so that's going to be another thing that will be coming along at some point in the near future. So from the context of the photo, in other words, what the people look like, where they're standing. I always use cars. If there happens to be a car in the photo, you can look up the car, find the manufacturer car and actually get the model of the car, and that'll give you just a real, and you look at the condition and you can tell pretty closely when the photos were taken, but that's going to be done by artificial intelligence. Okay, so I'm going to kind of look at a quick look at the website here that it looks like right now. Well, until it changes again, let's put it that way. They're not doing really dramatic changes to the website, but there are things that do shift and change from time to time. You might not be aware, but this is the startup page after you've signed in. It'll show you how many people and photos you have in that particular file, and you can have multiple files, multiple family trees on MyHeritage. You can, I've never heard of an upper limit of family trees, but there's an upper limit of reasonableness and what you can possibly use. But here, for example, the photos, you can put in your own photo. There's a little link over there on the right-hand side of that picture of the Great Falls of the Potomac. That is one of my photos. So that's one of my favorite photos that I've taken. And so I just put that in there as kind of the banner up there. And this is one of the trees that I have on MyHeritage. And they're all considered to be working trees. In other words, they're used for specific projects or specific information. And so that's kind of the way that I use all of these different, by having family trees on a number of different programs. They all have advantages and features that aren't in all the other programs. So here's the color coding that I mentioned earlier, and you'll see at the bottom, there's sort of a, well, I don't know how to characterize it. I would say sort of a orangey yellow color down at the bottom with the Christensen line. And then you'll see over in the middle, going back, that there's the same color with Jens Christensen. Well, Jens Christensen was Marinus Christensen's adopted father. And so Jens Christensen and Christine and Karen Marie Johansson, his wife, were the parents of Maren Christensen, who was down to the Oversons and down to my father. And then Jens Christensen, Marinus Christensen, was on my mother's line. And what happened here is that for family tradition, Marinus Christensen down there was said to have been adopted, and nobody, it seemed like in the family, knew how that had happened or when or how it was, why he was adopted. But a long story short, after years and years of research, I determined that Marinus was adopted. My daughter, Amy Theriot, did a just systematic search of all of the records for Denmark, where they were living in Denmark, in the parish, and found someone with the same name who was born on that same date. And that was a supposed connection, but ultimately what happened because of the DNA test is that we got DNA connections, direct measurable connections with the Marquardsons, who was the father of Marinus Christensen and his mother, who were not married, by the way. And their descendants show up in Denmark, and they show up as being related to us. And so we know now who Marinus Christensen's parents were. We've identified him and know that he in fact was adopted, and that my parents, who always thought they were related, were not actually related. So they were related only by the fact that Marinus was adopted. So anyway, that's kind of an interesting side note here. And if you were not knowing that you had a common ancestral line, you may find out by having color coded that it shows up that way. Okay, the ethnicity estimates are an interesting topic of discussion for those who are taking DNA tests. Ethnicity estimates are just that, they're estimates. In other words, they're guesses. They're not guesses, they're kind of statistical guesses. And the larger number of tests you have and the larger number of people that you have in your family trees, the more accurate that information can become. And so what you're seeing here is a considerable evolution of the way that the ethnicity estimate had been determined originally. So if we would go back in time and look at my original ethnicity estimates, they're quite a bit different than this. These are very much more specific. And then here's the question that comes up. There's two areas that I have, or three areas that I have to have connections to. Okay. Genetically, I'm connected to the Baltics, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus up there in the northern part of Eastern Europe, to Italy, and to the Middle East, over into Pakistan and Iran. So this could be fairly, there's a term I would use, so you get a little bit befuddled or kind of confused about, well, how does this happen? I have done research obviously for many, many years now, more than 40 years. And I have no idea in the world. I've never run across anybody who was from Italy. I've never run across anybody from the Middle East, and I have nobody in my lines that I can think of that came from Latvia or up in the Northern European part of the country. Yes, I do have plenty of Scandinavian. I have Netherlands. I have people out of in the British Isles, and yeah, I have a lot of people in the United States. So no problem. So where do these come from? Well, as we go back and as I do more and more research over years, I have basically come to the conclusion that I know where these people came from. First of all, my Jewish connection out of the Netherlands came from that upper eastern part of Europe. So even though I didn't have a realization of that obviously explains where those people came from. The Italians is another problem, and not a problem, but another issue. It's kind of a puzzle, but it's easy to explain because Italy, the Romans, had almost 500 years in British Isles. And so if you go to Great Britain, you'll find out that there's a lot of people in Great Britain that end up with Italian genetics. Okay, now how about this Middle European thing? Well, it turns out that one of my ancestors, direct line ancestors, was arguably a gypsy. That's Romany, and the Romany do come from this part of the world, from the western part of what's now India and that part in there. That's where they originally came from. So there are my lines that do actually support this particular ethnicity. And so you may be surprised, and if you have a puzzle like that, it may take quite a bit more research, but you may actually find how that would be possible. Now, Western Asian, I have no idea as yet, except that could be that Western Asian, the Romani people. So that's kind of what the kind of interesting thing that happens as you work with the ethnicity reports. The thing that's important about MyHeritage is that they have a constantly steady increase in the accuracy and the usefulness of their DNA tools. It's one thing to give you a DNA estimate. It's another thing to give you a matching estimate or bunch of people you're related to. It's another thing to give you tools that shows you how and where you are related. So on this particular graphic, you'll see that there's, and I've blanked out the names because there's privacy issues here. But unfortunately not all of them, but that's okay. It doesn't tell you how you're related or who we're related to. So basically it's telling you the surnames that are prominent, the places that are prominent, and records, and the theory of family relativity that gives you the common ancestor. So these are some additional tools that have been available. Chromosome browser that lets you view multiple DNA matches at once and pinpoint common ancestors. Auto clustering, which does the same thing. This would be something that you would have to put on a spreadsheet and figure out for yourself, and MyHeritage will do it automatically. And then they have the ethnicities maps like we just have that give you some interesting insights that may become a puzzle and a challenge to you to resolve. And then I've already mentioned about the Send-A-Mark and Explainer. This is just kind of a look at the overall catalog of records. Question about numbers of records. I look at this periodically, and I had put together this presentation, and generally speaking, particularly with when I'm citing numbers like this, then I will go back and look at the numbers to see how they've been updated. Well, in this case, they added nearly 1 billion additional records in the last couple of weeks since I did this, put this together. And so this number has gone up over 1 billion records in just that period of time. MyHeritage isn't one that parades their numbers around very, very prominently. And you really do have to look at their collection catalog to see what the totals are and how many they have. But one of the things that I point out is that the records for, and I'm going to go back to, let's see if I can do that easily. Yeah. There are millions and millions of newspaper records in the United States and Canada and Europe on MyHeritage that are completely indexed, completely searchable. It's just a tremendous resource for newspapers. So there's so many surprising and unexpected kinds of things that you will find, excuse me, that you will find on MyHeritage. It's just sort of an interesting experience to get into it. As I mentioned earlier, there's a number of videos. There are 71 additional videos dedicated to MyHeritage and all the aspects of the program. So there's quite a bit more information, and you can learn about some of the people involved and some of their activities and some of the things they've done in the general world. One thing that MyHeritage does is they do some amazing things that are only indirectly connected to genealogy, but very closely connected to the genealogy of the people involved in their programs. So one of the things that they did was to partner with Billion Graves and digitize, go out and use the staff from MyHeritage, the employees, to digitize every single grave marker known in Israel. So Israel is the first country to have every grave marker digitized, photo, and transcribed and indexed. So and that's all on Billion Graves. So if you want to, if you begin to see that they have some tremendous impact. They also have active oral history collections around all sorts of countries around the world. So places where where people would otherwise not have written records of their ancestry. There's also an additional 15 videos about MyHeritage on the BYU Family History Library YouTube channel. So I do these regularly and update them every once in a while. So I look like I have one in 21, and then I have one in 22, and now I have one in 23, and I'll be doing more. One thing, though, to understand also is that there are a lot of other general genealogical helps directly from MyHeritage on the MyHeritage's knowledge base. And this is something that's growing. It's part of the process of having more and more information to help the people. You'd think, well, you've got them on BYU, so why don't they? Well, there are people that are only going to look at MyHeritage, and so it's important to have their own records, their own explanations. And the thing that's interesting about, well, one interesting thing is that I've become involved in this, and so I have a few, not too many, but I have a few articles and videos here on the knowledge base. So you can learn, there's a genealogy course, a whole course in genealogy if you want to take it. It's an introductory class to genealogy that's online. It's right here. You sign in for it, and it's free. And you just basically can go through. And this one has 40 lessons. Their estimate is would take about 5 hours. And it's an online course from home. Okay. Well, thanks for watching. Do we have any questions?
James, we have a few that to go back to. But one of them was at the very beginning. Betsy asks, what is the best way to keep up with family search changes?
Oh, well, family search, the best way to do that is to watch the videos that are being put out by our BYU Family History Library, updating. Catherine Grant has been focusing on changes and updates on family search. And I think she does about as good a job, as probably a better job than anyone else that I know of in keeping everybody informed. So if you come on and watch Catherine's videos that are going up, she's pretty much in there explaining how everything works and all the changes. There's kind of it's impossible for us to keep keep updating the videos fast enough to keep up with with Family Search or MyHeritage, by the way. So it's just it's very interesting. Question is there some way to put DNA information from Ancestry? Yes, you can export your Ancestry. There's instructions. Just look on Google to get export and DNA from Ancestry. They'll take you to the part of the website. Then you can export the raw data and upload that into MyHeritage. Yes, I've done that. I've got my Ancestry DNA up on MyHeritage.
Delary is asking, excuse me, James, go ahead.
And then the other programs too, like 23andMe and things like that. If you can download your raw data, you can upload it to MyHeritage. Can you
keep interrupting you, sorry.
Can you access the knowledge base directly on MyHeritage? No, that's in a separate website. It's education.myheritage.com. And there might be a link. I'm not sure. I haven't focused on the link. Anything else?
Delary asked, I noticed MyHeritage has a DNA kit sale for $39. What's your, I guess she's asking your opinion on whether that is a good place to do your DNA test.
Absolutely. I would do it on, if you have any use for DNA, I would suggest getting it on multiple websites and having your tree on all the websites. If you're really trying to find out any information, you need to have that kind of a broad, the greater number of people you have with it have family trees and are on the website, the greater chances you are of running into relatives that you're looking for. So it's just a numbers issue. Yes, the answer is it's extremely valuable. Plus you get to use all the nice tools on MyHeritage.